Today is part 2 in a series where I try to reconcile contradictions between the Bible and science, or modern science rather, because, well, as I said before, what we know is always changing. And in today's episode, we'll tackle evolution as I promised. And so the creation story, at least the creation story of the Bible, is based on the book of Genesis. And today we're going to try and answer, can you believe both at the same time, despite the contradictions I claimed? Many people may say I'm already committing a fallacy because I'm implying that evolution is the only truth in science. Well, you're wrong. It is the only truth in science, and I'm not wrong for sort of, I don't want to say synonymizing, but something like that. I'm not wrong for somewhat synonymizing science and evolution because, well, as Richard Dawkins said, all respectable scientists believe in evolution, or rather believe in evolution as the explanation of how we came to be and how organisms progressed here on Earth. Because there are actually a lot of people who believe in God or the existence of a God. I don't know which one, but usually it's Christian or any of the big boy ones. They believe in God and believe that evolution happened. They believe that, I don't know, God helped evolution, or God banged the universe, then evolution just happened. That's just part of it, or something like that. So it's definitely possible to believe in God and evolution because many people do. So when I was younger and I was learning about evolution, well, I'm still young, but when I was younger, I was learning about evolution, and in you know comparison to the creation story, I was kind of conflicted. Which one do I believe? Because on the one hand, this book claims to be divinely inspired, and I was taught that it was divinely inspired. But on the other hand, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence for evolution. So, since I was a Bible believing Christian who believed that the book was divine, I assumed that the days of creation were symbolism of different time periods, or they were metaphorical. But the problem is that this was written literally. People who wrote this, people who read of this, believed it as a literal account of how the world came to be. Right? I mean, there's a lot of similarities to it and, Babylonian creation stories. And most people who believed in creation stories believed it literally. We believed it literally. I mean, people you know, before Darwin proposed the theory of natural selection, people believed a literal creation. So that doesn't really work. So let's start with creation. So let's start with the days. I've already tackled day 1 and 2 in my cosmology video, so you should check that out. But day 3 mentions fruit-bearing trees and plants in Genesis 1 verse 12. We now know that angiosperm, or fruit-bearing trees, didn't exist until the early to mid-Cretaceous period in the Mesozoic era, somewhere like 100 million years ago, I think. While gymnosperm only started to exist rather during the Devonian period, around 380 or less than 400 million years ago. Both existed after land animals started to, you know, exist. But of course, in the Bible, day 3, no land animals are in existence yet. So there's a problem with believing that each day represents different time periods because, well, contradictions as to which came first are present here. Yet the day 3 also mentions trees, but of course the first tree existed 400 million years ago. And 400 million years ago, there were already creatures on the planet. Also, I don't know if I don't know if this is like minor or something, or this is a major flaw. Day 4 is when the sun and moon are created. They were created after plants, but of course, anyone who's gone to school knows that plants won't survive unless the sun is present, right? Or at least you know, won't grow normally without the sun. But although to be fair, in the Bible, God, whoever he is described as light multiple times. So maybe you could reconcile that if you believe so. Then let's proceed to Genesis 1 verse 21. The fourth day, God mentions, or sorry, the fourth day is when birds are created. And during the time during the day rather, that the birds were created, there were no land animals yet. And of course, now we know that birds are and came from dinosaurs, and most dinosaurs were terrestrial. And since land creatures haven't been in existence until the fifth day, why the hell were there birds flying? Also, when was man created? Genesis 1 and 2 are different, right? Genesis 1 implies the fifth day, In Genesis 2 has man created before any shrub or plant has even been in existence. Of course, if you want to know the actual answer to this is because there are different authors in the book of Genesis. It was not written by Moses. It was not written by one person. It was written by different people. So that's the historical answer there. So those are the major biblical contradictions. I'm sure creationists or what's it called? Apologetics. They may be able to reconcile this. I'd love to hear what they have to say, but I just took the biblical verses that were I just took the Genesis story, okay? Now, let's proceed to evolution. I'm gonna show a little table here of the evolutionary timeline, just so you see. And contrary to the Bible, or much rather, contrary to a lot of interpreters of the Bible, rather, the Earth is not 6,000 years old, right? We have trees older than that right now, right? So the age of the Earth is estimated to be roughly 4.5 billion years old. Now, to many of you who may not be familiar with evolution or natural selection, rather, who are either creationists or just want to learn something, natural selection took place as early as the earliest complicated cells, right? Competing, the best survived and evolved. For example, you've probably heard of cell division. You've heard of it since you're like seventh grade or something. It occurs, right? One cell divides and multiplies. Some copies are better than the others. Some copies are better at making copies of themselves than others. And of course, competition happens and natural selection would take place, right? If one thing was altered on Earth, life today isn't possible, but rather other forms of life would evolve. Because contrary to what you may hear from Christian apologetics, life tunes itself to fit its environment instead of the universe being fine-tuned for life. I'll get into detail with this with the fine-tuning argument that I'll tackle in a different video. But many may say that, oh, you can't observe evolution firsthand, therefore, you know it's not really scientific fact, and maybe not even a scientific theory, right? Because a theory requires to be directly observable. And let's be real, evolution is very, very, very slow. Alright, there are certain instances where rapid evolution happens. So rapid evolution can happen, but for the most part, right, you can't really see evolution firsthand due to how slow it is in nature. But despite this, evidences for its occurrence are ever present all around us. But let's clear some misconceptions about evolution being a theory. First of all, a theory, or a scientific theory rather, is really different from the normal usage rather of the word theory. A scientific theory is the highest compliment a study can get, right? It's different from a hypothesis, it's different from a question, it's different from an idea. It's scientific theory is like the highest. And I know some of you have probably heard this, but like, oh, evolution is just a theory, but so is gravity. Does that mean gravity isn't real? Well, let's tackle this because a scientific theory requires a lot of evidence to be considered a theory, right? So let's say you take your book, for example, take a book, take a pen or something, right? I'll hold it over an edge, right? If I let go, since there's nothing supporting it, in theory, it will fall. In theory, right? Now you might be like, well, that's experimentable. Evolution is not something you can experiment yourself. And you may be right, but that doesn't mean that you can't find evidence of its occurrence all around us. For example, okay, fossil record, the DNA record, right? In theory, what happened before was, certain organisms evolved from other organisms. I don't know if I explained that properly. I hope someone corrects me. But in short, saying that evolution isn't scientifically, accurate, at least for now, simply because it's just a theory, is incorrect. Because there are many things that are scientific theories yet are considered facts given enough evidence. So, can you reconcile the two? Well, with the evidence, let's see what conclusions we can come up with. Exhibit A, Genesis is a myth, or the story of Genesis is a myth. But then again, if you're a Christian, for example, yet believe that the Genesis story is myth, What about other parts of the Bible, right? If we tested the book of Genesis and it fails, what if we test other books in the Bible and it proves to be false? Will you change your mind? Well, I'll tackle historicity and the other stuff in a different video. Although, by the way, historicity and biological accuracy is not really in the same subject, by the way, so I just clear that up. Exhibit B. Genesis is a parable or an allegory. Now, the only way you'd believe this is, of course, if you're trying to defend the idea that the book is divinely inspired. But I have a video. But my last video was tackling why believing something is divinely inspired is a problem. So I suggest you check that out. But we just proved why that's not the case. We just proved a while ago why you can't look at Genesis as a parable, and also, as I said in the previous video, you're ignoring the author's purpose and beliefs just to justify the fact that it's divine and can't have errors, right? Because people who wrote this stuff, people who read this, they believed it was literal, right? If God reveals the beginning, then why confuse us with this? I understand that the Bible is sort of artistic in its writing with poetry and metaphor, but most cases, this is life or death. You can't be confusing people on whether or not something is literal or fictional. Now, I purposely did not include Genesis is true as a conclusion here because that's not really a valid conclusion once you study the evidence. So I'd highly recommend, no matter what you believe, to go out for yourself and study both. Study both creationism, well, maybe not creationism, it's not really worth it, but I do suggest studying evolution for yourself and seeing. Even if you're a creationist, right, go, you might as well know your enemy, right? And let me know, or you don't have to let me know, but let's see what kind of conclusion you can come up with. But anyway, that pretty much does it for me. I'm the ITist, and remember kids, live by what you see.